Greetings and salutations, everyone. I hope everyone is doing well today. Today I have some very exciting, terrifying, informative encounters to share with you. I've got an encounter that happened in my town, in my county, the year I was born, and it is absolutely terrifying. I've got a couple of other encounters that are equally as terrifying. Before we get into these encounters, though, a couple links. As you know, I rely on my Patreon, my PayPal, and my merch to help the channel to continue to grow and go. Those links are in the description below. Also, Dogman, Frightening Encounters, Volume 1, 2, and 3. The audiobook version is available on Audible, Amazon, and iTunes. They were written by Tom Lyons, narrated and produced by me, Jeffrey Nadolny. Those links to those books are in the description as well. Now, I've taken enough of your time. Let's get on with today's upload. Shall we? Today's first encounter is very near and dear to my heart. It is literally 23 minutes from the location of this encounter to the exact location of where I'm recording this. Also, it happened the same year I was born, almost a week or two prior to. So, here goes, guys. Marty Paddock and Paul Goslin were driving through an isolated and swampy woods near Whitehall, New York in late August 1976, when they heard a chilling scream burst from the forest around them. The men stopped suddenly, thinking someone might be in distress. However, when they got out of the truck, all was quiet. The two men drove for a few more minutes before deciding to turn around and go back to the spot for another look. By this time, night had fallen. Among the gathering shadows, something large moved along the barbed wire fence, flanking the road. To the men's recollection, it seemed to tower nearly 7 or 8 feet on 2 legs. Suddenly, the creature began slowly coming their way. Goslin yelled at Paddock, urging him to floor the old truck. The men sped away into the night, leaving a wake of tire tracks and fumes. In short order, they arrived at the Whitehall police station, where they were met with a sort of reticence to investigate one might expect. Undaunted, the men enlisted the aid of another friend and returned to the site. The trio didn't have long to wait before the creature again emerged in the distance. Now Goslin and Paddock had another witness, and so returned to the police station. As luck would have it, Paul Goslin's brother, Officer Brian Goslin, was on duty when the men returned to the station. This fraternal link, coupled with the fact that theirs was not the first such report, prompted the officer to take the men's story more seriously. His first inclination, as a rational man of law, was to believe the men either misidentified something more common or were victims of a prank. However, upon learning the location was outside of Whitehall's jurisdiction, Officer Goslin sent the information along to the state police, who converged at the site and began scouring the locale for clues. He was unable to go himself and regretted this fact later. One officer's tense words suddenly erupted from the crowd. "What the hell was that?" All eyes followed his toward a heart-stopping sight of a strange bipedal form as it sauntered back into the dense brush. Larger than any local bear and walking on 2 legs, the creature vanished into the night. The men raced to where it had stood only moments before. They were shocked to discover footprints that, despite being 3 times larger and very similar to a man's, after hearing all of this, Officer Goslin decided to return the next night with State Trooper and friend George Fox. The two scoured the area for some time before deciding on a stakeout approach. They sat in their respective vehicles with the lights out and engines off. The night ticked by painfully slow, broken only by the rustle of trees and the occasional night bird. Officer Goslin got out to stretch his legs when he heard heavy footfalls from the dark woods beyond. His partner's voice erupted from the CB radio. "Brian, I hear something." Goslin heard something big moving through the trees and tall grass. Goslin grabbed his .357 Magnum and hid behind his door. Goslin guessed the thing must have been more than 300 pounds. From head to toe it was covered in shaggy hair. Its eyes were large and seemed to be possessed of a ruddy glow in the glare of his lamp. Goslin knew this was no bear. It moved like a man, but looked like an ape, and was headed straight for him. Suddenly Goslin bathed the night in 200,000 candle power of light from his massively powerful spotlight. Ahead of him, perhaps 50 feet away, the lumbering giant suddenly halted, throwing its arms in front of its eyes and releasing a deafening scream. Goslin cocked his gun, but held his fire as State Trooper Fox came barreling down from the meadow beyond in his vehicle, screaming over the radio the whole time. Fox raced away into the night, leaving Goslin to fend for himself. His eyes turned back toward the creature, somehow though the officer sensed the beast was not intent on harming him. It was frightened by the light. He couldn't bring himself to shoot it. He had a clear shot, but simply could not pull the trigger. A moment later, the creature was racing back toward the dark woods. In the spotlight, the officer could clearly see the animal's backbone and its buttocks, caked in mud from where it had sat in the earth. Goslin was left with the impression that he himself was the intruder in the night. He had transgressed upon something else's turf. Then it was gone. Goslin kept the light on a bit longer as he sat in the mud thinking over what had just happened. He pondered if he should have shot the creature. There would have been at least proof. He might have been hailed a hero or not. If there weren't many of these creatures living in the world, he wouldn't have felt good about taking one down. He was certain of this. In the intervening time between Fox's abrupt departure and Goslin's arriving home to the phalanx of reporters, word had spread through the area like wildfire. He ignored the media and locked himself inside. Later that afternoon, Officer Goslin returned to the scene to discover many large footprints pressed deep into the mud. There was no sign of claw marks, and the stride was too enormous for a man to have hoaxed. In the evening papers, Goslin was made out to be foolish, though quotes he had never given. The townfolk were equally unkind, and the upper echelon in the department told officers to keep their mouths shut regarding anything they may have seen. But just because a town wants to disbelieve something does not make it go away. The next day, reports came in of something monstrous repeatedly crossing the nearby Poultney River, which divides New York and Vermont. From its muddy banks, state police were able to cast one of the giant footprints. No conclusion could be reached. Shoddy investigation techniques, coupled with unwillingness to pursue the truth too far, led to a case that simply dried up beneath the August sun, and by September the excitement was subsiding, and men like Officer Goslin kept quiet about what transpired for decades thereafter. With such formidable trace evidence, multiple law enforcement eyewitnesses, and a highly active site, why couldn't more have been learned from what had happened in Whitehall, New York? There was no need for convenient explanations of trans-dimensional portals to dismiss why the beast remains elusive. Honestly, this fiasco lies squarely on the shoulders of human failings. So this, like I said, is in my neck of the woods, and I agree. A lot could have been done different, but we're talking 40-something years ago, and I guess, I don't even know how to put it, acceptance of cryptids existing was definitely not looked upon like it is now. I mean, yes, we are looked upon as riding the crazy train when, you say, hey, I believe in Bigfoot and Dogman and this and that. But honestly and secretly, there are people that probably believe that do not admit to believing. It would be foolish to not believe. So I'm going to do a little more research. I've known about this and these cases and sightings through, Whitehall, Florida, and my entire life. I know that this summer, my dad and I are going up to Whitehall and Florida area, and he's going to talk to some old friends that he has, and we're going to do some exploration. It's kind of a little plan that we have set. I'm going to also go up to Lake Champlain, which is roughly 35 to 40 minutes away north, about 10 to 15 minutes north of Whitehall. And I'm going to do a kind of online report of Champ, the aquatic monster of Lake Champlain that resembles Nessie. So I'm going to be doing a hands-on video in Whitehall, a hands-on video in Lake Champlain, and I've decided that I'm going to go to Horicon, New York, and do a hands-on video of the missing 411 of 2015, which is 42 minutes away from my house. So that's what we have to look forward to. My area is rich with cryptid encounters, and I'm going to start kind of not taking advantage of, but taking advantage of where I live and reporting, possibly learning more from just where I live. So, enough babble. Let's move on. I'm going to stay local for the next part of today's upload. While discussions about Bigfoot can seem rather recent in our United States history, Native Americans have talked about Sasquatch for hundreds of years. Often considered, the West Coast phenomenon sightings have also appeared all over the Adirondacks, from Saranac Lake in the north to the famous sighting in Whitehall in the southern foothills. If this is indeed a myth, it is a remarkable, durable one. According to legend, Bigfoot is a giant arthropod, ape-like creature, very hairy, very smelly. This could explain the report of highly pungent, neglected human smell in the wilderness area near Moody Pond. In fact, in Florida, Bigfoot is known as a skunk ape. The first time I went to college, it was in Florida, and many of my classmates lived cheaply in a nearby trailer park in the Green Swamp. When I went to a party there, I discovered that most of the local residents had a skunk ape story. One woman was washing dishes when she looked through her kitchen window. She found herself staring into a hairy, surprised face, only a foot from her own. Apparently, it was a comedic moment where both of them screamed and the skunk ape ran away. As a typical trailer configuration, her home was mounted on cement blocks. For this intruder to be face to face with her, it was at least 8 feet high. Remote places seem to breed Bigfoot tales, since they are considered close kin to the abominable snowman or Yeti of the Himalayan region of Nepal and Tibet. And in the late 1950s, permits were issued to U.S. expeditions climbing the high mountains that detailed proper Yeti handling. According to Embassy Counselor Ernest Fisk, writing on November 30th, 1959, all expeditions must first buy a permit. Secondly, the group was cautioned that the beast could be either photographed or taken alive, but it must not be killed or shot, except in an emergency arising out of self-defense. Thirdly, any such discoveries indicating the existence of the abominable snowman had to be cleared through the Nepalese government. It would have been a public relations bonanza, if it had even occurred. The Northern Sasquatch Research Society has collected more than 200 eyewitness accounts of encounters. Some of them are seemingly simple, like the reports of rocks being thrown at people. Longtime Sasquatch investigator Bill Brand tells a story of a man who thought the splashing and thunking were from a beaver in the water until the rocks started hitting very close to where he was standing. They were the size of a basketball. One struck the man's vehicle, but the story did not detail the possible reactions of the insurance adjuster. My husband remembers a story from when he was a young child spending summers in Saranac Lake, from the adults talking about it, and a memory of its coverage on local news. He recalls that a woman was driving in a remote area. She stopped because it looked like a bear was lying in the middle of the road. She got out of her car to investigate the motionless figure, but as she approached, she realized two important things. It was not a bear, and it had woken up. She raced back to her car, got in, but the creature pulled the door off. But at that point, another car appeared and frightened it away. I have found no accounts of this, but it would have taken place in the early 60s before such things were exhaustively categorized on the internet. Another local story is told by an adult, and it happened in the summer of 1996. A group of friends were camping in the Pine Pond area at the base of Mount Ampersand. As dusk fell, they were fishing from a canoe. The two were chatting, and the eyewitness was scanning the northern bank of the lake, a place they were very familiar with, except for a strange shape on the edge of the woodline about 50 yards away. When it was pointed out, the friend immediately saw it. Both recalled later that it reminded them of a black bear standing broadside. They began to row cautiously towards it. The friend whispered, "It's a bear," but then the shape stood up, revealing that it had been crouching there on its feet like a catcher from a baseball team. Now that it was upright, it looked to be at least 7 feet tall, with dark brown hair, with a face that was fleshy around the upper cheeks. Dark eyes were clearly visible and had a brightness about them. Both agreed that they saw the creature moving its head and hands, and that it looked at them for seconds, maybe as long as 10 seconds, with its head tilted up, as though sniffing the air. The sound of snapping twigs some 50 feet behind it made the creature spring into action. It turned to its side, then checked on the canoe before spinning completely round, darting into the woodline like a cat. The two friends floated in the canoe, debating on the wisdom of paddling to shore to look for tracks. The witnesses' wishes to get away were overridden by the curiosity of their companion, but upon investigation, they did find 2 markings in the sand, rather blurry from pivoting movements of a feet. The witness found the whole experience extremely unsettling, even though the creature did not act threatening. And every sound that night kept them awake. The people who did not have the experience claimed they saw a bear. It was no bear. This is the part I find most convincing. Over and over, such accounts from experienced hikers, campers, anglers, and hunters confirm the fact that while it might have looked something like a bear, it was not one. These experienced wilderness folk agree that their experience didn't sound like, walk like, or have a head like a bear. The famous Whitehall sightings. This is especially true of what is considered the most spectacular Adirondack sighting, the famous Whitehall events of the mid-70s. This little town nestled in the foothills of the Adirondack Park has local history of sightings that stretch back hundreds of years, according to Monsters of New York, Mysterious Creatures in the Empire State by Bruce Hollenbeck. The events began on August 24th, 1976. Teenagers Martin Paddock and Paul Goslin and Bert Kinney were in a field near a bear road, just outside of town. As told to Bill Brann of the Northern Sasquatch Research Society, the three were driving in a truck when they saw a large human form standing on the side of the road. After turning around in an attempt to get a better look, loud squealing, screaming began as the creature began running toward them. Goslin urged the driver to get the hell out of here. Paddock did so, burning a measured 57 feet of rubber in the process. They went to the police to report the incident, only to be met with skepticism. However, Goslin's father, Wilbur, remembered hearing an eerie screaming in the area the previous year. He rounded up 2 other men and set off to Bear Road. The creature was still there. Goslin stated, "It scared me a lot. What really attracted me was the eyes on it, big red eyes. It just stood there, it didn't move. It was 7 to 8 feet tall, about 300 to 400 pounds. It had thick, short brown hair, coarse. On the head, longer hair. Brian Kinney was certain about his sighting. It was no bear, I know that. A bear doesn't walk like that." Goslin contributed a lot of detail to subsequent drawings. Another sighting occurred that night, near where other law enforcement officials found 19-inch tracks near Pulteney River Bridge. Casts made from these tracks have dermal ridges like fingerprints. Whitehall resident Paul Bartholomew, author of Monsters of the North Woods. People don't come across Bigfoot in areas with lots of people or in broad daylight, glimpsed instead of seen, heard late at night or in a tricky dusk, and always mysterious. Bigfoot stories are excellent tales to tell around the campfire deep in the woods. And that's when we are most likely to have an encounter. Up the odds. Plan a visit to Saranac Lake. Choose a favorite way to get out into the wilderness. And remember to bring a camera. Enjoy the Adirondacks, guys. All right. So this is some examples of my hometown. There will be some pictures included in this. Picture one will be the documentation that expeditionists needed to fill out and use when going to Tibet and Nepal. The second photo, and there will be a number 2 on these photos in the video, Sharon Ellis drew the sketch after listening to eyewitness reports. This is what the woman who claimed that the Bigfoot ripped off a door, this is what she claims to have seen. And then number 3 will be Paul Goslin's sketch of what he saw that night. So, very interesting. I hope you guys enjoyed today's upload as much as I enjoyed sharing it with you. Like I said a million times in this video, I love that where I live has such a history steeped in cryptozoology. So, it's kind of in my blood, I guess. Anyway, moving on. Have a great day, guys, and thanks for always listening.